this is for, so that we can create the wording to put in our policy that we do not teach critical race theory. And we have a couple of suggestions. We're not going to be talking about critical race theory today. We're talking about the policy that we don't teach it and the wording that goes along with it.
If I could just interject, after that motion was tabled for further discussion to decide what's exactly meant by CRT, to be clear, some of our administration and our teacher leaders, our program leaders, were reviewing social studies curriculum, including advanced placement classes, psychology. And the wording of the motion that was proposed was broad enough that it could rule out some of the state standards that are required for instruction. Probably, I'm making a judgment here, probably not what we're trying to get after to say, we don't teach this, we don't want to teach this. But I feel that we should narrow the motion if the board decides to make a motion to make sure it's what we're intending and there aren't unintended consequences where we can't teach state standards that are required. The other thing that I'm aware of, the agenda item is for a board action item. Certainly the board could decide, the policy committee could decide to make a policy to bring forward to the board. I would recommend we hold on a formal policy if that's even desired. A motion is enough to dictate, here's what we won't do. If there's a desire to do a policy, I would suggest we hold off, because very similar bills are currently in Wisconsin legislature to make laws about it. So I wouldn't necessarily want to make a policy and then we would come back and change that policy if those are enacted into law. So I'm saying I would recommend, if you're going to make an action item, we do that to move forward and then determine if the policy is needed at some point if the law doesn't pass in the place that we would be following anyway. So just a little bit of background before today's discussion.
Before we start, permission to speak. I would like to just correct the record. I know I've only been here for 5 months, but I have been with policy. So.
And I have too. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Actually, I'd like to turn it over to Craig. He's done some homework and he's come up with some resolutions, and these are similar to some of the states that have passed, some of the resolutions passed in other states.
On your desk, I think everyone has something that I've worked out as a basis for this to begin our discussion. And as you read it, I would like to make some comments on it. And again, as a basis to begin our discussion in more detail. The first part of the resolution, I labeled it a resolution for lack of a better word. I don't know if that's the proper term to be used or whether we should call it an action item or whatever. The Arrowhead High School curriculum shall be guided by its mission statement. And then below that, I have the mission statement, which is, I think you've all heard, that is, empower students to be engaged, confident, continuous learners who utilize the essential skills to collaborate and contribute within the local and global community. The reason I put that in this is that I think it would be valuable for us to keep the big picture in mind, what we're trying to do as a school. And as important as this particular issue is, I think it always should be kept in the context of the larger mission statement that we have held to. The next statement says, further, the AHS curriculum shall adhere to board policy. Okay, that's kind of redundant, perhaps, and in some way, some would say perhaps unnecessary, but it reminds us of our governing principles. This is how we run our school according to board policy. Next, it says within that policy, the following statements shall be included. Okay, By the way, I think, again, to reiterate what Ken, Deanna, and Laura have said, it is worth the time to have a discussion with this in this context. This process is important. It will end up presumably being thorough, clear, and transparent. And it will be discussed here, it will be discussed at the board meeting, if it were to go that way, upon recommendation or not of this committee for approval or disapproval in an open public as observed meeting. So policy statements that should be included are points 1 and 2. Point 1 simply states, Arrowhead High School reiterates and confirms that it shall conform to the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Again, just a reminder of our governing principles. We adhere to state, federal law, and our board policy. Second statement here says, nothing in the Arrowhead High School curriculum shall promote or advocate for the following. And there are subpoints A, B, and C. Many states have, are in the process of, or have already passed laws prohibiting the teaching of critical race theory. I've looked at several of them. Many are long, detailed, and wordy, in my view. Some are concise and yet clear. After looking at a number of them, I think what I have put down here is try to go toward the concise and clear side of things. Wording, as we all know, is very important. Some of these statements that I've seen in winding their way through state legislatures include the word teaching. Okay, now that, in my mind, and this is just me speaking, can be a loaded term. What could be construed as teaching or prohibiting teaching of? Is a student raising his hand or her hand and asking a question to which the teacher responds and answers? Is that teaching? Do we want to prohibit this? I personally think not. What else could be construed as teaching? A free-flowing discussion with the teacher as a neutral facilitator. A lot of that goes on in the school on all kinds of topics. Is that teaching? Do we want to prohibit that? I don't think so. For example, is there teaching about National Socialism in any curriculum in our school, in any schools in the state of Wisconsin? Well, communism. Can we teach this? If we don't teach something, how are kids supposed to know what that is? Just even to know what it is. That's not to say we advocate for it or support it, but it is to say our students need to be educated to know what these things are. Okay? Is an assignment to read subject matter by authors of opposing points of view? Is that teaching? Do we want to prohibit that? I think we're best served by not using the word teaching. It's my own opinion. We'll discuss it, of course. By not using the word teaching in our policy. Better, which I have included here, better served, I think, is the use of the word of the phrase, we will not promote or advocate certain kinds of curriculum. Again, number 2 says, and then I'll follow with the A, B, and C underneath that. Number 2 says, nothing in the Arrowhead High School curriculum shall promote or advocate for the following. And then, to be honest with you, I was cut and pasted one state's legislation on this topic. A, we shall not shall not support or advocate for the following. A, that any sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin is inherently superior or inferior to any others. B, that individuals should be adversely treated on the basis of their sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin. C, that individuals by virtue of sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, and national origin are inherently responsible for the actions committed in the past by other members of the same sex, race, ethnicity, religion, color, or national origin. In light of these comments and this proposal, which I'm sure we will discuss, and maybe there are others as well, I would submit this for, again, for our consideration. Thank you.
Comments?
I think this is really well thought out, Craig, and I appreciate all your hard work on this. And looking at what Wisconsin is considering in the legislation, it includes a lot of what they're talking about. And personally, I don't think the legislation they're working on is going to go anywhere, because I have heard Governor Evers will veto it.
Very nice.
WEAC even has something on their website about promoting critical race theory, that they want it in the schools. So I think it does behoove us to pass something on our own and get something on the books. And I do like this, so I would be supportive of this.
It's so commonsensical, it's almost embarrassing that it has become significant. And so, boy, I appreciate your craftsmanship in putting it together. I wonder if there isn't a third element of this that would say something like, political science theory, popularly known as critical race theory, teaches a belief system in many respects that would be in violation of these policies.
I pulled up policy 511, and that's your board policy on non-discrimination, or non-discrimination statement. And based on that, I would recommend number one be extended, because non-discrimination is absolutely the Civil Rights Act of 1964, but it's also Title IX of the Educational Amendments of 1972, it's Section 504, which is disability discrimination, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Age Discrimination Act of 1975, non-discrimination provisions in the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So to be all encompassing, because this isn't just dealing with the racial piece as it's written with our mission statement and so forth. Perhaps number one, either listing all of those or having number one refer to the district's non-discrimination policy 501 or 511, something like that, just so it's all encompassing. I would not want someone to come up later and say, so you're not going to discriminate based on race, color, national origin, sex, or religion, but you're going to discriminate based on my child's disability. Why isn't that in there?
Chris, you were going to say something.
Actually, Tim stole my words. I just wanted to add the idea of discussing critical race theory as it pertains to your points, because I think it's well stated, but also to add those words to it, because I think that that helps you describe it better. And I think Tim, as a lawyer, you spoke it better than I would. Appreciate it.
No bill for that one.
So what would you like the wording to be?
So I guess I would like to give you something maybe that I've had a chance to think through, but I'll restate what I said, which is that there is a political science theory popularly known as critical race theory that in many respects would violate several of the principles that we have espoused. And that would be a violation of Arrowhead policy.
like that because it doesn't attempt to actually define critical race theory.
Oh my God, have you tried to do it?
Oh, my
Because
God.
I have,
There's no
and
way.
I don't know how.
Well-
Except I know what I don't like.
Plus, it's kind of swishy, you know, it's hard to nail it down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I had Kate make up copies of this before the board meeting for everyone. It was all about critical race theory, and it was a model school board language to prohibit critical race theory. And it's pages and pages long. It's very descriptive, but I think it's too much that we would have to adopt into a policy. I like it cleaner and more concise, like what you have come up with, but this was very helpful in understanding a lot about critical race theory. And I learned a lot from it, so I just wanted the other board members to have a copy of it. And when I look back on what our original motion was, I almost laughed because this is too little. It doesn't cover everything we need to, and it's not really on the point of what we want to make, that we do not want critical race theory or any aspect of it being taught in our schools.
Appreciate you saying that. That's the reason we sent it back to policy committee for, just for this type of discussion, or further review, more in-depth analysis, that kind of stuff. Craig, I think you've done an excellent job of researching this, coming up with some great resolution here, if you want to call it, as you call it. And Kim, I think your thoughts are very well put together as well. You're not stating what critical race theory is, but we don't agree with it.
Well, and I think, our basic philosophy has not changed in many years, right? We try to teach our kids to be good people and, open and aware of the others around them and be nice.
So you want to wordsmith that for us? And possibly
I-
put
I-
that. So in addition to what's points 1 and 2 on this, maybe a 3 with referring to the non-discrimination.
Well, I would
policy
just
part of it.
recommend, number one
Number
is
one.
referring to maybe a quarter of our non-discrimination policy. So I would recommend either listing all of those different acts or referring it to the non-discrimination policy. So if new acts come into play, that policy would be changed, and we would have to go back and change this one.
Okay.
And I'm always in favor of brevity, so maybe you're just referring to the fuller policy in lieu of referring to Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Right, and that discrimination policy just changed within the last school year because of law changes. So, that doesn't happen every 4 years.
So
we can look at update them.
I would recommend that we bring it back up for the policy committee.
With a new wording on it. So referring to
another
511
option.
and then your wordsmithing.
Another option could be, since we'll be having a regular board meeting Monday night, it could be brought back as a draft for discussion. Possible action, or if there's further discussion, postpone the action to September 8th, only 2 weeks later.
It sure be nice to take this one off our plate. right?
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you. I like your suggestion. Bring it to the board meeting on Monday.
For potential action, and then if it's not the way the board wants it, it can be postponed until the next.
Meanwhile, Tim and Laura, can you two work together on?
Of course we together.
Assumptions.
And I have to say, Craig is the author of this. I was feeling like you were the first person that I would send a draft text to.
Thank you. Sure.
And then if it's okay with you, then I'll connect with Laura.
Yes. Let's go to 2, review of policy 113 and procedure 113, filling board vacancies. We should all have it in front of us.
Sorry.
Yes, please.
So the stapled packet has, or, no, I'm sorry, has your stapled packet from last night that you might have with you, or else within your agenda, both the policy and the procedure documents are listed. Going through the recent filling board vacancies, there were issues brought up that we may want to, or the board may want to consider. For clarity, so for instance, in my 3 or 4 discussions with Attorney Bob Butler, in his review of this, he said there are things in your procedure that are not, they don't match the law. They're within the law, but they restrict you. And he said he found that highly unusual, that a board would be more restrictive. So for instance, in the procedure, let me find it. In the procedure, our policy states, I'm having trouble finding it right now, that the application, the interview process will all happen within 60 days. Oh, it's in the policy, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the procedure. The appointment will be accomplished as soon as possible within 60 days of the vacancy. The law says the process of appointment will be determined within 60 days. So the law says establish your process within 60 days and then move forward. Maybe you're done in 60 days, maybe it takes you 70 days. So that was one of the legal recommendations. Rather than the process will be accomplished as soon as possible, it will be the process of appointment, or the process to implement an appointment would be determined in at least 60 days. So that was one idea from legal counsel.
And we've had that process in place for many years. Is that correct?
Correct. One of the tricky parts about this wording saying it will be accomplished within 60 days. Another part of the law talks about if there's a tie, the tie should be broken after 60 days. Which I don't know that any of you or us were aware of. So how can you accomplish the process and wait more than 60 days to break a tie? That it doesn't fit. If you're going to do a tie the same way your procedure has it outlined. So as the procedure has it outlined, the policy says a majority vote of the remaining board members is required for appointments. And then in case of a tie, so if there's more than one candidate, which you may want to clarify number 5, board members will vote for one candidate. That has been perceived by members of the community reporting to me. That means that no matter, if you only have one person on the ballot, that person wins no matter what. It's unanimous.
Can I just correct that? Because we don't believe that at all.
Okay, but if someone emails me and said
Okay,
that,
I'm
then
just
it
saying
would
that
be,
most of the community does not believe that that candidate is automatically, that there still is a majority vote. So I
I'm
wanna
just saying that it was, someone emailed to me saying, if there's one candidate, just like an election for a municipality, if there's one candidate, they get the job. And this is not an election, it's an appointment. And so maybe the board would want to make that more clear. If there's more than one candidate, board members will vote for one candidate using one of the following methods. So if there's 3 candidates, 4 candidates, this is meant to mean if there's 4 candidates on a ballot, the board members can't choose for their top 2 favorites. They would choose one favorite. So maybe you don't feel that needs clarification because the policy itself, that a majority of the remaining board members required for appointment. It's another point of clarity that the attorneys brought up.
Well, you also have the word election in there. The quorum majority vote of the seated board member will win the election, the appointment. That needs to be changed as well.
With the vote. And I'm sorry, I'm looking at what was attached to my packet. So what item are we looking at?
Procedure.
Yep.
Policy 113,
Mhm.
appointment.
Down
bullet
in number
5.
5.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Another point that the attorney brought up, number 1 in your procedure, it talks about district personnel shall provide public notice of the vacancy in a designated local newspaper and on the district's website. So we've done that, and we posted in the windows where we normally post our agenda here at district office. The attorney said you don't have to post it anywhere. Typically, you would want to post it so people are aware of the opportunity to apply for a vacant seat. You may or may not want to use a newspaper and a website, because a website can be corrected quickly, as we found, and the newspaper cannot. That would delay it a week. So the board could decide to keep it as it is, and you're noticing in more places. Or the board could decide, let's post it on the website. That's where we draw people's attention to. And then if there's a change, that could be changed. And those are, I believe those are all the points that the attorney brought up as things that might want to be considered. And obviously the whole policy and procedure can be.
Yeah, I mean, in the theme of closing the barn door after the horse is gone, I'm wondering if we shouldn't add to our notice requirements that all the board members are advised of any deadlines for filing an application, so that we never again have a situation where only part of the board knows that a deadline has been extended. I'm also I don't think that an extension of the deadline on the date of the original deadline is appropriate ever. Yeah. So taking and making a decision as a deadline is about to expire to extend concerns me.
But that wasn't the case, Tim.
Well, I'm not saying it was,
I agree. I
yeah,
totally agree with you.
and
on
so
those points.
maybe if we, I'm not sure what the resolution is. I think the issue probably should be addressed.
So I agree. I mean, just for clarification, the date wasn't extended on the first date, Friday. It was done a week and a half prior to that. In hindsight, yes, you're right. There should have been more notification, that kind of stuff. That was an error on our part. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's pointing fingers today. I think we're just saying that,
I'm just
okay,
saying it was-
going forward.
yeah, going forward. Yeah, I agree.
I don't think we should have it on the newspaper. I think limits us so that there is changes, and just so there's consistency, that I think we keep it with the website as the only place. I mean, today's day and age, nearly everyone has access to the internet.
Well, plus the fact newspaper subscription is dropping anyway. Or it also has been for a long time. I think there's probably more people signing up for Eline, online version than that, the same thing.
But I
I
know with
agree.
some of those, you have to pay for a prescription, so it's not
Oh, yeah.
accessible. At least with our website,
That's free.
it's there, and there's consistency of communicating. So if I get something or Tim's gets something, we can direct them to the website, like here's the deadline.
The one thing I do like though is I like sending out something to a third party that cannot be, I don't like this word, but I'm going to use it, manipulated within our system. That we said this is, the deadline or whatever it may be, and it should take some effort to modify that stuff. It shouldn't be 3 keystrokes and suddenly our website changes. No obvious. I'm just, the heated conversations that I've had over the last couple of weeks and the phone calls and emails I've gotten, I have to say, I 100% respect the concerns of the people who are expressing them. And so when we do something, we should be making that public in ways outside of the things that we control, like the website. And paying the newspaper to put a legal notice in is, not a great way to spend public money. On the other hand, it gives us some sort of, actual record of what we actually said, as opposed to it just disappearing into the ethosphere the moment somebody changes an entry in our website. So I guess until somebody has a better idea on what third-party resource we might think of, I'd be in favor of continuing to publish that sort of notice, so that we have to explain why there's a difference if there is one.
But we do have the notice at the Merton Town Hall. That's a paper copy. I mean, if you're looking at paper copies,
Yeah,
I mean, we do have that one.
so,
I mean, is that enough?
I guess I sort of wonder
I mean,
what,
when you talk about spending taxpayer money in newspapers, whatever,
yeah,
I mean, we do have one, and that's on the, I think it's those three different ones, right? Merton Town Hall, website, and newspaper, correct?
Merton Town Hall website and our window, our posted
Yeah.
window. And then there are certain things that must be published in the newspaper. Like for
board
instance, the
meetings.
annual meeting
Yeah.
agenda, there's things that must be by law. This is not, and the attorney's words were, why do you post it in the newspaper? Because it's part of the procedure.
How much does that cost to do?
Some of our postings are hundreds of dollars. each
Well, I
time.
mean, of an open seat, how much was that?
I don't know, if you know, offhand, if you remember.
71 cents per line
Oh.
is the cost.
so
Well,
so less than $10.
I don't think that's
I think
a horrible expenditure.
Amy says she'll pay.
I think the more we can advertise anything, the better. I would be in favor of keeping it in the newspaper and have a record out there.
We are jumping to
I'm just
bullet 3 right now.
No.
We never got through bullet 2, so let's get through bullet 2 and then we'll go to the notification of the newspaper. I'm sorry that it transposed
No,
that way,
actually,
but-
3 is about changing our official newspaper, so,
Yes.
Okay,
or am I looking at something else? I thought you were talking about the agenda.
If I may, I like Tim's idea that there be a third party accountability, whether that is on paper in written, town hall, or here on the door, or in the newspaper. It's a good idea to have third party accountability.
I like the, go ahead.
That's what I should say, when we make the change, we just need to make sure all three elements
For sure.
happen.
the correction in the newspaper.
Other thing I would suggest, if we do make a correction, rather than just correcting it, maybe there's a statement that this has been updated here for reading. So it's not just, I didn't see the first one, I saw the second one, maybe I saw the first one, didn't see the second one, whatever. At least when the correction comes out, it stated that this is an updated, has been a correction because there was an error, or not necessarily an error, maybe there was a change, not necessarily an error, but I think it would help for clarification that it has been updated.
I think that's a great
Right.
idea. And I have to say, I'm not all that concerned that we have to publish in the newspaper a modification of the deadline if these other procedures are in place, where all board members are notified that the website shows the original deadline and an explanation as to why it's occurring, and that the timeline for it occurring is well in advance of the expiration of the original deadline. Just because I know that getting things published in the paper takes time, and if we have to publish that change, we may wind up having to postpone our meeting.
I like the idea of the checks and balances of keeping it in the newspaper as well, because it kind of creates a more permanent, unchangeable document that we can all refer back to and the public can refer back to. I think it helps a lot with the transparency of the board. I also do think that, I actually think that if there is enough prior notice, I think it's important to be able to change the newspaper. Just because, again, that's another, that's something that people, not many, but some people will refer back to, so that we're in a line in all possible places. I don't know how much notice it takes. I'm not familiar with that, but if we have several weeks or even a week, I think that that's a legitimate amount of time to be able to contact the newspaper and say, hey, this date has changed. And I like your idea of explaining, this is why it's been updated.
I think that discussion as far as the length of time and the lead time is going to come up in our next item.
Okay.
As far as changing.
Okay.
Possibly changing.
Yeah, we have it listed as 10 days at a minimum.
And so if we were to issue an original notice in advance of that 10-day notice period and a decision were made, say, a week beforehand or, whatever, that for some reason was necessary to extend that deadline. Chris, are you saying that if it's feasible, we would publish a revision, but if it weren't feasible to get that in the newspaper in that shortened period of time, we could proceed without?
I
So
think so. I mean, if it's like
so
a-
long as it was on the website and all board members were given notice of the modification.
Yeah, like for instance, if the newspaper says, well, we need a 3-day notice and there's 3 days left, obviously we won't be able to make that revision. But if there's a 5-day notice, or if there's 5 days prior to that and they need a 3-day notice to change something, I think it behooves us to
Yeah.
make that revision if it's possible.
I mean, I published tons of legal notices, and if you can get it going a week from the day that you send it in,
Yeah.
that's, doing pretty good. And so, okay, I think I understand that part.
So let me clarify, because having to implement the policy and procedure, let's say, same thing happened this time. It was decided, let's extend the deadline. We change it on the website. It stays the same in the newspaper. That's not changed. Will that be a problem for the community if they saw it in one place? I saw it published in the newspaper August 6th. You've extended it to August 9th. Now there's more applications. Mine was turned in by the time it was published in the paper, and it was changed on the website and other people applied. I feel like it's very similar to what.
Well, I mean, I have to say, was it once bitten, twice shy? I think that if our public notice in the newspaper references the website for the most current information, and our website, if there is ever a modification again, then I think we would be very cautious about ever doing that again. It shows the original deadline, shows the revised deadline, and offers an explanation. You're never going to make everybody happy, right? But I think that is, it leaves open the possibility that there might be human error somewhere in the process that requires correction. And if that happens, we're able to raise our hand and say, okay, mistake made, things are being modified, and everybody understands it. And those that don't have the capacity based on what was published in the paper with reference to our website to have totally current information.
So I have one additional thought with
Yeah.
regards to that. So at our last board meeting, there was also an announcement by you letting the whole public know that this is the date. We all agreed to the date and what's going to happen. So I wonder, just like the email that you sent out recently about COVID to the public, to say, hey, this is our policy going forward it's just so everybody in the public, like parent, I got it as a parent. Perhaps something like that could also be sent out in the rare, hopefully never case again that this would happen. That you could say, hey, this is what's happened. I'm trying to be transparent to the public. This is where we are with this. We've decided as a board to extend this deadline. It has been updated on our website. If it hasn't been updated, we don't have time to update it in the newspaper. I'm sending this out so that this is another additional way of communicating with the public to let you know that this has changed. and that the opportunity has now been extended.
You know, in theory, that sounds good, but you're hitting a very small portion of the population by doing that.
But that goes out to all the parents.
Goes out, exactly, it goes out to the parents,
Right.
it does not go out to the public.
Well, this is
So
just
now-
one more check and balance is what I'm saying. That might be another additional way to be as transparent as possible.
It very well may be, but again, you're not hitting the entire population.
Agreed.
Now, I, as a non-parent,
Yeah.
have the opportunity to say, well, why wasn't I notified?
Well, now
Why
we have,
didn't I get a special email? Or why didn't I get something in the mailbox that says, hey, this has been changed? I think that's just opening up a possibility of creating more turmoil. That's all. And I agree, but I think just because of, what do we got? About 19, what's the population of the Arrowhead district? Well,
We have about 17 to 19,000 households and families. Well, when I send out a school closing email, that goes to about 3,300 parents. That might be two emails per household. So our parent population is probably about, what would that be, 1%?
that's
10%.
it just shows, I'm not saying you're gonna hit everybody, but now we've done
It's just
everything.
one more attempt.
It's just one more attempt. I'm not saying that this is the only thing we're doing. This is just one more attempt to try to be as transparent as possible, which is what our goal is, and let as many people know as possible. I know that wouldn't hit you, but hopefully you'd be looking at the website, or maybe at the newspaper, or maybe at a posting at the school. So now we've just tried to do it more due diligence, is all I'm saying.
And so Chris, are you saying that that would sort of be in lieu of revised newspaper notice?
I'd say in addition, if, I'm not thinking this will ever happen again. I'm hoping this will never happen again. In the very rare instances that this would ever happen again, it's just one additional check and balance to try to attempt to communicate with as many people as possible that, hey, this is changed. This is the reason. This is what we're trying to do to mitigate it, and then to move forward.
I
Again,
think
my
the
only-
likelihood of it happening again is probably slim, but it may be based on no applicants, for instance.
Sure.
Well, then we would extend the deadline. So that's certainly feasible. If the board wanted to change your language is in terms of tie breaking, having the president choose or break the tie. The attorney said that's certainly school districts use that and it's a way to expedite the process. But more common, if it's a tie and you vote 3 times and it remains a tie, then the whole process is reinitiated. That doesn't guarantee a different, if the same 2 candidates or 3 candidates apply, it could just delay it longer and longer and longer. But I bring that up, if you wanted to change that, then it could be a likelihood, a stronger likelihood that we'd be reposting and extending the deadline.
Kent, what are your thoughts on taking that burden off your shoulders?
You know, I don't have a problem with, I mean, it's worked for years, okay? I don't have a problem with that. And I wouldn't have a problem making a decision if it weren't for the contention because of the errors in the dates, okay? If we'd had 2 candidates, 3 candidates, if we had a hard, fast deadline that hadn't been changed and everything that went along with that, and each of the candidates applied by the posted date, I have no problem with the president making that selection at that point. Okay. I didn't feel comfortable with this just because of the controversy that surrounded the error in the dates and the posted dates. That's where I felt it was a no-win situation. Okay.
Okay.
We had public, which, and rightly so, felt they'd been misinformed and so on. And I just felt that in the best interest going forward, that probably wasn't the best. It was a no-win situation. It doesn't matter who the president picked at that point, it was going to create turmoil. And it was just going to further create issues downstream. Okay. So I don't have a problem with it in the future. And I will, I would almost guarantee that we'll never have a date or posting in posting again. I'm sure that'll be checked 18 ways from Sunday. So I think this is a one-off. So I mean, that's how I feel about it.
I mean, so my thought on this today, I think, is more committed than it was a week ago when I first realized I felt strongly about it, which was that when we're facing a tie situation, it probably becomes more important than ever that we take a step back and come back at the problem in different ways at different times until we can at least get a majority of the board. It's convenient to let the president take the heat and decide things like that, but I wonder if it doesn't injure, good boardsmanship and, the ability to reach consensus within an organization. I sort of think that we're better off working with an 8-8 board and limping along until we can get a consensus on a 9th board person than we are, having the president have to stand up and say, the decision's been made, here it is. Then, one side or the other winds up being unhappy. And maybe it's we just happen to be in the midst of a particularly, a tense period in our history where the factions in life and society and school boards exist in ways that they haven't before and probably won't in the future.
So you want to add another line where if no finalist receives a quorum majority vote on the second ballot, the voting will continue in the same manner with the 2 top vote getters. If no candidate receives a quorum majority vote on the third ballot, the board president should determine the candidate that wins. Do you want to put a phrase in between that saying that the board will deliberate
I think what I would say is that
before the board president determines?
the solution I would have that still allows some possibility for an expedited determination would be that the board president, may make the determination with the consent of the majority of the board. So if we're tied, and we agree, president decides, then president decides. And if we can't even agree that the president decides, then we've got to restart the process.
Then reinitiate.
I think that makes more sense than just having a policy change so that the board president doesn't, and we just automatically repost. I mean, that helps expedite it. It doesn't guarantee that we wouldn't be reposting, because we might not be able to come to consensus on a majority in that, or proof for the president. This isn't about me, this is about the president.
Mhm.
If we can't come to a majority vote that, yes, it should be or shouldn't be, whichever, then we repost. It would help expedite, but then guarantee we're not still reposting, but it does give us options.
Yeah.
And I have to go there.
And at least
I have no problem
we'd
with
have a majority in favor of something that day, And
My only challenge to that is that then, I mean, this could potentially be something that could go on for quite a long time. And then that district would be disenfranchised and not represented on this board. So that's my only challenge there. I mean, I do think that I obviously, as president and tiebreaker, that's not an easy position, but I think that that's in this situation to be able to seat somebody. I actually think that that's, I mean, since that's the way that it's currently written, as hard as that is, I think that's what has to happen, because otherwise, in this situation, Swallow wouldn't be represented. And then, we could go back and we could post this again and we could be in the same situation, and then 60 days later, post it again and be in the same situation. So,
And with that in mind, you could end up, okay, now we're past that point, we can't appoint anybody. Now we're up to the point where you file for election. And instead of actually appointing somebody, let the electoral process take over.
And I guess I would point out, Chris, that every one of us is voted for by every elector in the Arrowhead School District. And so although there are designated representatives, those designated representatives are still elected by our entire community. And so the people who live in the Swallow District would still have 8 representatives at the table, just nobody with that title.
okay, fair.
So some of the changes that we're going to make on policy 113 is the process to implement an appointment, correct? On filling board vacancies.
Right, so just, like, if we start at the top of policy or of procedure 113, just to make sure I have this accurate. We talked about public notice of the vacancy happen in the designated local newspaper and the district's website. That would remain the same, correct?
Mhm.
I didn't hear any other changes until number.
So I guess maybe I would say there is one change. Public notice of vacancy. The designated local newspaper, the district's website, and by email to all existing board members.
Okay. All right, then. I believe we're down to number 5. Where we changed the last sentence, instead of saying board members will win the election, it should be appointment because it's not an election. And then we get to the tie language. So the last sentence, everything would remain the same. The last sentence, if no candidate receives a quorum/majority vote on the third ballot, and then you can help with wordsmithing, something to the effect, if the majority of the board, or if the majority or quorum/majority of the board approves, the president shall break the tie. If not, the process would be, or the application process would be reinitiated.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
Sure. So if no candidate receives a quorum/majority vote on the third ballot, maybe something like provided a quorum/majority of the board approves, the president shall break the tie. If no quorum majority is reached,
If the president is not so authorized,
okay, the president. This is why I'm not an attorney.
the president is not so authorized, then the process will be begun again.
President is not so authorized, the process, the application process, or do we just
Probably
refer
the
to
no-
the vacant?
The notice and application process,
Okay, the notice and application
or,
process would be reinitiated.
right,
That's what I heard in terms of changes. The other suggestion, now not on the procedure part, but policy, would you be interested in changing that 60 days as the attorney had recommended? So rather than the process of appointment will be accomplished, the process for appointment will be determined.
and that was on the policy itself, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Policy.
But going back to procedure, it seems like maybe we need a new subsection to deal with modification of the date. So I guess my thoughts as we set the procedure for modifying the date is that it has to occur at least 5 days before the expiration of the deadline, or else the process just needs to be reinitiated. And when it occurs, it has to go out to all board members. The district's website will be updated showing the original deadline, the revised deadline, and offering an explanation as to the modification. And if feasible, notice of the change will be published in the newspaper. Chris, I guess I'm a little concerned about doing our parent list only because we I think find ourselves picking our electors sort of, and we've got a much broader community than just the parents. And although as a parent, I would appreciate getting that information. I think it's important that this board be representative of the entire community.
No, absolutely, yeah, and I'm not in any way, suggesting that that's the only means, and the only reason that I think that that's just another additional means. I think it's more than anything to show more transparency on the board, to try to say, hey, we're doing all of our effort, we're doing all of our due diligence. Now we've updated the website and explained why we're changing the state. We're updating the newspaper if at all possible. And now we're adding this just to be as transparent as possible. I agree with what you're saying, but I still think that that I don't know what that hurts. That's where I'm coming from.
Is there, like, when you send the updates, like a quarterly update of what's going on to the school to the parents? Is there an option, like, for community members go on to the website and say, hey, sign me up because I'm still interested? And then so we have kind of not just a parent database, but people that
Right,
want to know about Arrowhead as a taxpayer or, alumni or something. So
right. Our
if we send
monthly,
that letter out, it's not just to parents, but it's also.
right, we posted in there. Our monthly Arrowhead advisor, which we put on hold last school year, we're rejuvenating the first week of September. So that gets emailed out to all parents. But in the past, and I would assume we could do that this time, there's a sign up on the website. So any member of the community can sign up. In fact, I took it upon myself to sign up the superintendent of all of the K-8 districts because I felt like they should know what's going on at Arrowhead. So
Mhm.
you can put in any email to receive that monthly newsletter. We're changing formats rather than a MailChimp format. We're moving to a different type of format.
Mhm.
So I think that we can still do that through the website
Because I say those notices that it is going to a bigger pool.
if they're signed up.
Yeah, if they're signed up.
But then you're just getting as many things as possible. That's all I'm saying.
I still have a problem with the idea of saying it's the parents. Not because I want the parents to get, I agree with you, Tim. We're now hitting 10% of the population of the Arrowhead district, which now in fact is saying we value the parents more than we do the rest of the community. And I don't think either way, whether we send just to non-parents or the parents, we're hitting a subset of the district. And everything else we're doing is available to everybody. So I just don't think it's the right way to go just because we're just.
But I mean, I get what Chris is saying as far as trying to come
Oh,
up
no,
with
I'm-
a solution. and-
Right, no, I'm sorry. I backed up. I changed horses when I'm telling you about it. I didn't even fall off. I'm talking about the notice for the.
A direct email is what you're talking about versus the newsletter that
Yeah,
anyone has access to.
Well, not those are for the board appointment, right, not just the.
No, I think the intent is good, but I don't think it's, and I guess I could use the word fair to the rest of the community because parents are getting additional information about a board vacancy that the rest of the community doesn't have. That's how it looks to me.
Okay.
So.
We're good on 113?
Well, can I clarify something? So Tim, when you were talking about, so under number 1, I'm thinking the letter D. If an extension is deemed necessary, and then as you said, it would be 5 days in advance, the original deadline, the change deadline, or reason for the change would be
So you, right.
posted on the website and if feasible, renoticed in the newspaper. My
And
question is, how, 5 days in advance, do we need another bullet point that says we get to the deadline and there's no applicants, then we reinitiate? Do we need to specify that, or would someone say, you didn't say it within 5 days ahead of time?
yeah, well, I think restarting the process is different from modifying a
Okay.
process that's underway. And you know, I certainly understand that given the context that we're acting in right now, it'd be nice to have absolute clarity on that point. So I probably somewhere in here, yeah, particularly when we talk about if the president doesn't make the call, restarting that process is not changing the deadline. It's, you know, we sort of wash our hands of our first effort and start again,
Okay, so that's in just the different section that explains the types.
It's a do-over.
right? It's nice thing about writing the rules, right?
So rather than if an extension is deemed necessary, maybe it's if a change in the process. The example of an extension is deemed necessary. Could there be any other change other than a process or an extension?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess you could imagine somebody suddenly needing to add another topic that you want applicants to address or that sort of thing. So I suppose, yeah, but I agree that that would be nice to, the example, e.g., you know, change the deadline. And then let's not forget that in addition to, so it goes on the website
email
showing the original deadline or process, showing the revised deadline or process, and offering a explanation. If feasible, it goes into the newspaper and all board members are given notice.
I envision doing that similar to we do with the policy where the changes from, it shows the stripe through, it shows the new, you know,
And we may need to be clear that if, you know, if we're beyond that 5-day deadline, the process just has to be
Just laid out.
either played out or stopped. I mean, I guess it depends on what the problem is. You know, if we've got a, if we had an error that, you know, makes, you know, what seems like a deadline not be clear, and it certainly would be fair to, you know, stop the process and start it
Okay.
again. On the other
And then
hand,
is that a change of the process?
Oh.
Because we've just said that would happen
let's-
within 5 days. of the original posting.
and we're back to kind of the same thing where it gets to the deadline and should you be acting at that point in time? You know what, I think that the board can act, you know, maybe the language says something to the effect that, you know, any defects in the process that can't be addressed in at least 5 days in advance would be subject to motion at the designated hearing. And then the board will just have to use their boardsmanship to try and solve the problem. Or,
So it's not hamstringing you with 5 days if something happens on day 6.
Right.
It's still going to reinitiate.
right, and the board would be making a decision as a whole in the presence of the community.
Now we're good.
I feel like we're just getting rolling. Let's look at some other
Get to work, though.
Well, I guess the next question is procedure, okay? We do have a new appointment coming up, okay? I presume we'll be, well, I don't know this, I presume we may be reinitiating the process. May decide that the president chooses, I don't know what outcome that's going to be. But if we do choose to reinitiate the process, then I think it would behoove us to try to approve this and have it in place for the next go around.
On Monday,
It could be the first agenda item.
that date certain that we picked next Monday.
I don't know if we necessarily have to have it actually done on Monday. If we notice it and bring it to the full board, correct, because our next, we could take action at the, I think we'd have to, I think it'd be wise to go Monday. Does that give us time?
Mhm.
Because that way there is no question, this is what we intend to do going forward. We have a meeting Monday to reschedule or determine what we're doing, is how we're going forward, that kind of stuff, to make sure that everybody understands that this is the new policy and new procedure that's in place for this upcoming reappointment process.
That's okay.
Right.
Okay.
It would seem silly to have this all done and clarified and then revert back to
Or
something
back,
else.
something else is.
So we'll make sure we get this drafted.
But we have a motion on the floor for Monday, so to make a vote, so I don't know if it's right to retroactively affect this.
We have a motion on the floor.
Well, maybe.
I made a motion
You made a
yesterday
motion
at
yesterday.
the
That was
meeting.
postponed.
That was on.
Well,
That would
well,
have Monday.
before Monday.
Right,
So that would be one of several
but
motions.
the previous board vacancy seat isn't grandfathered in with any of this now. This is happening after that.
Right, right. I think it was, I perceived at least that meant if we're restarting, if we're
Okay,
initiating,
okay.
let's use this.
Right.
So maybe we agree today that agenda item number 1 is to take up your postponed motion and
The only thing I would say contrary to that is the motion about suspending the application of the procedure where we will have it all accomplished in 60 days,
okay,
because we're not. So
so
to match that to what the law says versus our policy. So we can properly act on
Because
any
we've
other
already
motion after
superseded.
that, because we're not breaking your procedure of within 60 days.
okay,
Does that make sense?
that
That
sounds
seems
all right
fair.
to you guys?
And then move with the rest.
And then if we find ourselves without a majority approving the motion, which would be consistent with, the votes before it, then we move
To the
to
next
modify
motion, which was
our policies and
Right.
procedures.
that we would suspend the procedure where the board president would break the tie or shall break the tie to reinitiate the process.
And what,
I'll be working with Bob Butler today. to
yeah,
get
what concerns me is
that
that given that we've had the 3 tied votes and we've got your motion on the table and he's got a current obligation to break ties, I think we've got to do something to alleviate Kent from his obligation to break ties, or it seems like your motion is sort of vulnerable to, a conflicting obligation.
breaking that part, right?
And so I think that, I forget the terminology they use.
Suspending the application,
So, right, suspend the application of
that
the-
part.
Kent's obligation, which we're about to change in agenda item number 3. But that lets us take this up in the order that you're concerned about. It's easy enough, right?
Perfect. Mhm.
So we suspend the tiebreaker obligation, we extend our 60-day time limit, we take up your motion, and if needed, well, whether needed or not, then we modify this policy for,
Procedure.
And we have a motion. If Amy's motion were to fail, then we need the motion to reinitiate the process.
mhm,
But right now, that motion was drafted as a combo of relinquish, temporarily suspend application of the board president's responsibility to break the tie and vote to, and act on reinitiating. We want to separate those into 2. Is that what I'm hearing?
Good we have a lawyer on the board.
Thank goodness, yeah, no kidding.
It's cheaper than calling Bob Butler.
I was gonna say, probably saved us hundreds, right?
Yeah. So, policy 151.
No, policy 151 came up, Kent brought up the idea, our official newspaper has been designated as the Lake Country Now. We've used that for many years. I think it was established when Lake Country Now was a different,
Lake Country
or Lake
Reporter.
Country Reporter, and then it turned into Lake Country Now, but it's only once a week. It's not necessarily focused on just our community. So the recommendation was, should we change, or the suggestion is, should we change it to the Freeman?
Yes.
So Kate did some research. The Freeman has a physical circulation, so the hard copy, 57,200 households, plus the online edition. And the cost is 47 cents a line. And it runs daily, Tuesday through Saturday.
It's cheaper than the Lake Country Now.
And the Lake Country Now has a smaller circulation and is 71 cents a line. So nearly double the cost.
Let's go with the Freeman.
That Kate, she's always out there saving us money.
Thank you,
See, Amy, it's gonna be a lot less expensive for you.
I know. I can write a smaller tab.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Thus,
Sounds like a
agenda
great
item
idea.
number 3
It
to
was easier to produce.
I think we should change it to the Waukesha Freeman and not the Lake Country Now. Are you all on board?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so coming out of this meeting, we have consensus to bring to Monday's regular board meeting the changes to policy and procedure 113 as a potential action item. The critical race theory, the wordsmithing will happen, that resolution or motion, whatever we want to call it, or possible board action, and the official newspaper for change. Is that accurate for consensus of the committee for
Yeah.
moving forward?
I guess.
So that all would happen on Monday. Is there any of it that you would prefer to wait until September 8th for any reason?
No, just get it going.
That's Monday, at 7 p.m.
Right, Monday, August 23rd, 7 p.m. The South Campus cafeteria.
Any other items?
Clarification on the critical race theory statement. How will we bring forward policy language? So are we actually setting a new policy item, policy 174, just pick a number? Are we actually approve a policy, or are we approving just a statement that this is what we believe, and it's going to go back to policy for actual policy development?
It sounds like it's proposed as a resolution, right?
Right, a motion.
I wasn't sure how it was going to be proposed. I focused more on the language, quite frankly. I defer to this group and the larger board to determine where that should be placed. I thought it would be best to put it as a board policy. But Laura, I thought I heard you saying that was not advisable. Is what is your?
Well, just because if the law is going to be passed, it might be good for the board to wait and see what that law says before there's a policy. But the way you have this written, further, the Arrowhead curriculum shall adhere to. We can look through, I'll look through our curriculum related policies and see if, like, where that might be most appropriate to put in a curriculum policy, if that was your intention.
I thought that it would belong under curriculum in the board policy in that respect. As I think about it, and as I interact with you and others here, it seems to me that I guess I would prefer it to go into the board as a board policy. If we need to modify it per state law, great. It's very possible that this legislation will not become law because of the potential veto of our governor. In which case, I think it would be appropriate for us to do this, to be written in board
as a standalone. Yeah,
Well, yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
agree,
great.
exactly, yes.
In that event, I think it should come back to policy for actual approval of the policy. Policy number, all that kind of stuff, and then go to the board. as
Right,
opposed to just-
Then I would recommend we bring the motion, the resolution, or the action item. Here's what will happen as written and how it will be modified. So on Monday, it's a directive to administration,
to develop
let's-
policy.
draft a policy, then it would come back through policy committee.
I am so anxious to get this off our plate. And the one sentence that we're talking about drafting is not that complicated. Maybe get a pen I can borrow.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can agree. If we agree on this. This isn't too tough. So we have, so a political science theory popularly known as,
To bug out, I have to go to work, sorry.
oh, and now we're really gonna do some next.
I have to make money so I can buy the newspaper.
We'll start a GoFundMe page for you.
The political science theory popularly known as critical race theory has in many respects proposed beliefs that are in violation of the foregoing non-discrimination policy. And thus would be prohibited under this curriculum policy. Let me read that out for everybody again. A political science theory popularly known as critical race theory has in many respects proposed beliefs that are in violation of the foregoing non-discrimination policy. And thus would be prohibited under this curriculum policy. How about and thus would not be an appropriate element of curriculum under this policy?
My son and I talked.
All right, one more time, I'll read it out loud. A political science theory popularly known as critical race theory has in many respects proposed beliefs that are in violation of the foregoing non-discrimination policy, and thus would not be an appropriate element of curriculum under this policy.
And where would that be inserted?
That would be an item
Number
3.
A third item. Okay. Additionally, Laura would include under item 1, references to Title IX, ADA.
Right, so I would change the
etc.
wording of 1 as written completely to reference our non-discrimination policy.
So potentially we could vote on this and be done with it on Monday, is what we're potentially saying, right?
I think so.
Well, we still need to develop action. Yes.
Yeah, I can draft that policy because you also, if it doesn't look the way you intended, you could approve it
And then-
provided these modifications are made or whatever. Or if it's just completely off from what you were thinking, then it could be postponed until September 8th.
Good.
Tim,
So
thank you
Tim,
for
I'll
writing
Yeah,
that.
can I have that?
Yeah, how
Thanks,
about if I
Craig.
send it to you by email, because then you don't have to try and read this. I have a secretary who gets paid really good money to be able to decipher.
Thanks for bringing it, Craig. That was well thought.
And I'm really happy that we're doing it as part of policy.
Or 8:21. Meeting adjourned.